I don't know if the feeling of going numb has a sound, but on that autumn morning, in the middle of a crowded Manhattan, I heard my heart very clearly, as if someone had just squeezed it shut. Not because I'd lost my job, not because someone had died, but because the man I had once loved most in my life had suddenly appeared on every billboard across New York. Not just 1, 2, 3, 10, dozens. From Times Square to Soho, from Penn Station to Fifth Avenue, Malcolm's face covered the whole city. There was a billboard for watches, a billboard for perfume, a billboard for fashion. There was a giant billboard, taller than 20 stories, with nothing but a single portrait of him. Malcolm wore a perfectly fitted black suit, his calm eyes looking straight into the camera. The corner of his mouth still held that same familiar smile from all those years ago. Only one thing was different. Now, the whole of America knew his name, and I was the last person to find out he'd become famous. I stood in the middle of the crowd flowing past. A girl of about 17 pulled her friend's arm and shrieked, "That's Malcolm Reed. He's so gorgeous." A middle-aged man stopped his taxi just to hold up his phone and photograph the billboard. A young couple argued over whether this ad campaign was really worth tens of millions of dollars. No one knew that the person standing right beneath that billboard had once shared a cramped bed with Malcolm for almost 2 years, had once been the first person he ever said, "I love you" to, and was also the last one to hear him say, "We should stop." I lowered my head. The phone in my pocket buzzed. A message from a coworker. "Brady, are you at the office yet? The meeting starts in 10 minutes. I checked the time. Almost 9. I should go. But my legs wouldn't move. I kept my head tilted up, looking at Malcolm, the man I had spent the last 3 years trying to erase from my life. But New York wouldn't let me forget. My name is Brady Carter, 27 years old. I work as a graphic designer for a media company in Manhattan. I live in a small rented apartment in Brooklyn with an orange cat named Pumpkin. My life is very ordinary. Go to work, come home, cook dinner. On weekends, read a book or jog along Brooklyn Bridge Park. If anyone asked whether I was happy, I'd say, "I'm fine, I guess." That's the answer people give when they're trying to convince themselves everything is fine. The truth is, there's a part of me that never moved on. That part is still stuck back in college. In an autumn long ago, when I first met Malcolm. If I could turn back time, I think I'd still choose to walk into that library that day. Even knowing how much the ending would hurt. It was the first week of freshman year. Columbia was always as crowded as a miniature city. I hated crowds, hated having to make conversation, hated the feeling of being the new one. So instead of joining the student mixers, I clutched my laptop and hid away on the 4th floor of Butler Library. It was quiet there, few people, and there was a huge window looking out over a row of maple trees. I thought no one would ever come up there, but just as I set my backpack down, a voice sounded from behind me. "Excuse me." I turned around. A guy taller than me by almost a head was holding a thick stack of books. "All the tables downstairs are taken." He smiled very politely. "Can I sit here?" That was the first time I ever saw Malcolm. The first thing that caught my attention wasn't his looks. It was his eyes. Very blue. Not a bright, vivid blue. More like a lake in the late afternoon. Peaceful. Still. And a little sad. I nodded. "Sure." He set his books down. "Malcolm." I looked up. "What?" "I mean, that's my name." I laughed. "Brady. Nice to meet you." After that, neither of us said another word. For almost 3 hours, we sat across from each other, each doing our own work. Every so often, one of us would happen to look up at the exact moment the other did. Then both would quickly duck back down. Around 4 in the afternoon, my stomach growled, loudly. Loud enough that I wanted to crawl under the table. Malcolm tried to hold back a laugh. "I'm guessing you haven't had lunch." My ears burned. "Yeah. Want to go eat?" I'm hungry too." He said it so naturally, as if we'd known each other for a long time. 10 minutes later, we were sitting in a burger place right near the campus gate. That was the first time I learned Malcolm was a junior, 2 years older than me, majoring in marketing, working part-time at a photo studio to make some money. And I told him about how I just moved from Seattle to New York, living away from my family for the first time, living in a big city for the first time, feeling this small for the first time. Malcolm listened closely, didn't interrupt, didn't offer advice. Only at the end of the meal did he say something I'd still remember years later. New York isn't gentle with anyone. I laughed. That sounds terrifying. It is. So how do you survive here? Malcolm shrugged, then looked straight into my eyes. Find someone who makes this city feel like home. At the time, I just thought it was a nice thing to say. I had no idea that Malcolm himself would become my home, and also the person who'd teach me that not every home lasts forever. If you asked me when it was that love began, I wouldn't be able to answer, because it didn't strike like lightning. It came so slowly that neither of us noticed. After that burger meal, Malcolm and I didn't exchange phone numbers, didn't make plans to meet again. I figured that was the end of it. A chance encounter, a meal between two students. Then everyone would go back to their own life. But 3 days later, when I walked into Intro to Design class, I saw Malcolm standing at the back of the room. He wasn't a student in the class. He was helping the professor set up the projector. He saw me, looked a little surprised, then smiled. Brady, Malcolm, you're taking this class? Yeah. Nice. I laughed. You take it too? No. Professor Harris mentored me last year. I just came back to help him out. Before he left, Malcolm set a small note on my desk. If you get lost around campus again, text me. Below it, a phone number. I stared at the note for a long time. The corner of my mouth kept curling up on its own. That afternoon, I texted him. It's Brady. Didn't get lost today. Less than a minute later, my phone buzzed. Shame. I was about to brag that I've memorized every building on campus. That was the start of conversations that would stretch until midnight. Malcolm wasn't the type to text constantly. Sometimes he'd disappear all morning. Then right at lunchtime, my phone would light up. Where are you? Just 3 words. But strangely, I always answered right away. If I said I was at the library, 10 minutes later Malcolm would show up with 2 cups of coffee. If I said I was working in the design studio, he'd bring a sandwich. I thought you were busy? I am. Then why'd you come? Because you forget to eat. He said it like it was just obvious. Once I asked, do you take care of all your friends like this? Malcolm went quiet for a few seconds. No. Then why me? He looked away. I don't know yet either. That answer stayed with me for months. Time passed faster than I expected. The maple leaves on campus turned from yellow to red. The first cold winds arrived. New York slid into winter. That was also when I discovered a small secret about Malcolm. He was terrified of the cold. A guy nearly 6'3", played basketball, hit the gym regularly. But the moment it dropped below 5 degrees Celsius, his hands turned red, and so did his nose. I teased him endlessly. An Ohio boy who can't handle the cold? Malcolm pulled his scarf up higher. I handle heat better. No one asked. Keep laughing then. I am laughing. He pretended to glare at me, then burst out laughing too. We walked along Broadway, splitting a hot chocolate between us, passing shops that had already started hanging Christmas lights. For the first time since I'd left home, New York didn't feel foreign to me anymore, because Malcolm was always right there beside me. When winter break came, most students went home. The dorms emptied out. I decided to stay because the flight back to Seattle was too expensive. Malcolm didn't go back to Ohio either. He said he wanted to save money. Christmas night, the whole campus was nearly deserted. The 2 of us bought a large pizza, carried it up to the rooftop of the dorm building. The wind was bitterly cold. The city glittered in the distance. Malcolm handed me a can of soda. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. We clinked cans, sat in silence for a long time, until I asked, do you miss home? Yeah. Why don't you go back? He looked down at the lights below. My mom died when I was in high school. I froze. My dad remarried 2 years later. He gave a soft laugh. He's got a new family now. I'm sorry. You don't need to be. So every Christmas, I usually just stay on campus. That was the first time I saw Malcolm look that lonely. Not the kind of loneliness that comes from having no friends, but the feeling of having no real place left to go back to. Without thinking too much, I moved closer to him. Our shoulders touched. Very lightly. Malcolm didn't pull away. He just said quietly, "Thanks." I didn't ask what for. Sometimes, just having someone sit beside you at the right moment is the biggest gift there is. After winter break, something between us seemed to shift. Neither of us said it out loud, but we both felt it. Malcolm started calling me B. Just one letter. No one else called me that. And me. I unconsciously started memorizing his whole schedule, remembering which day he had a shift at the studio, which day he had a game. Once he came down with a cold. I walked nearly 2 kilometers through falling snow just to buy chicken soup. Malcolm opened his dorm room door. Hair a mess. Voice hoarse. "What are you doing here?" "I brought food. It's snowing out there." "I know. You walked." "Yeah." He looked at the bag in my hand, then looked at me for a long time. Long enough that I started to feel embarrassed. "B. Yeah. Has anyone ever told you you're too good?" I laughed. "No." "Well, I'm telling you today." He reached out and took the bag of soup. Our fingertips brushed, just for a brief moment. But my heart pounded so hard it startled even me. For the first time, I couldn't keep lying to myself. I didn't just like being around Malcolm. I had already fallen in love with him. And what scared me most wasn't the fact that I'd fallen for a guy. It was, if Malcolm didn't love me back, I would lose the most important friend of my life. I kept that secret for 3 months. 3 months of pretending everything was the same as before. 3 months of reminding myself that Malcolm only saw me as a friend. And in those 3 months, I understood myself more than I had in any period before. Before college, I'd never loved anyone. Not because I never had the chance, but because I always felt different from the other boys in my class. When they gossiped about the cheerleaders, I just stayed quiet. I once tried dating a girl in my senior year of high school, thinking maybe I just hadn't met the right one yet. But after 3 movie dates, the thing I remembered most was the relief I felt when she said, "Brady, I think we're better as friends." At the time, I didn't understand why I felt grateful. Then I met Malcolm, and every question in my heart found its answer. One evening in early spring, Malcolm texted, "Can you come out with me for a bit?" I checked the time. Almost 10. "Is something wrong?" "Yeah." "Something kind of important." My heart suddenly clenched. 20 minutes later, we met in front of Butler Library. The wind was still cold, but most of the snow had melted. Malcolm didn't take me to our usual coffee shop. He walked me across campus, to a small courtyard behind the music department. It was strangely quiet there, just the rustle of leaves. He stood still for a long time, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets, eyes fixed on the pavement. "Are you okay?" I asked. Malcolm took a deep breath. "B, I want to tell you something." The way he said my nickname made my heart race. All this time, he gave a forced smile. "I've never told anyone this. Ever since I was a kid, I always thought something was wrong with me. I didn't understand." He kept going. "In high school, all my friends liked girls. I tried too. Tried dating. Tried to change. Tried to become the person everyone expected me to be." He looked up at me. Those blue eyes, for the first time, were full of worry. But I couldn't do it. I held my breath. "Brady, I'm gay." The air seemed to stop. I looked at Malcolm. He looked back at me. There was no shame in his eyes, only fear. Fear that I'd turn away. Fear that this friendship would end. I smiled. A smile I couldn't hold back myself. Malcolm looked confused. "Why are you smiling?" I shook my head slightly. "Because I was just thinking. If you hadn't said it first, I probably would have had to." He blinked. "You mean?" I took a deep breath. For the first time in my life, I said out loud the thing I'd kept hidden. I'm gay too. Malcolm stood frozen. Then he burst out laughing. A soft laugh, like he'd just set down a weight he'd carried on his shoulders for years. We're both idiots, he said. Yeah. I was scared of losing you. Me too. For months. Me too. We looked at each other. Neither of us knew what to say next. But strangely, the silence in that moment felt more comfortable than any conversation we'd ever had. After that night, nothing changed right away. We still ate lunch together, still studied together, still went for walks, but whenever our eyes met, both of us would blush first. One afternoon in late April, the school held a spring festival. The whole campus was full of stalls, music, and students. Malcolm pulled me toward the ball toss game. Wanna compete? What if I lose? Loser buys dinner. That's a scary reward. I'm broke. So am I. The result was, I lost badly. Malcolm laughed so hard he had to hold his stomach. That evening, we bought 2 burritos and sat on the lawn in front of the library. Partway through eating, Malcolm suddenly asked, If I end up moving to New York for work later, would you stay? Of course. Good then. Good how? He took a bite of his burrito and pretended to be casual. I don't want to live in New York alone. I looked at him. You won't be alone. Malcolm turned to me. What do you mean? I smiled. At the very least, you'll have me. He didn't answer, but the tips of his ears turned bright red. A week later, the night before finals, Malcolm and I studied until almost 2 in the morning. Only a few people left in the library. When we walked outside, it had started raining. Spring rain. Light. Cold. We ran to the awning of a building. Great. I sighed. Forgot my umbrella. Same here. Malcolm watched the rain, then suddenly grabbed my wrist. Run for it. To where? Back to the dorm. That's far. 3. 2. Malcolm. 1. He pulled me straight into the downpour. We ran, laughing the whole way. Shoes soaked through. Clothes plastered to our skin. By the time we reached the dorm building, we were both out of breath. Water kept dripping from my hair. Malcolm looked at me, then burst out laughing. You look a mess. So do you. We stood very close. Close enough that I could see the drops of rain caught on his eyelashes. Neither of us said anything. The sound of rain drowned out everything else. Malcolm gently brushed a wet strand of hair off my forehead. Very slowly, very softly. Can I try something? I swallowed hard. Try what? Malcolm looked straight into my eyes. His voice so quiet it almost dissolved into the sound of the rain. I want to kiss you. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't want him to, but because I'd imagined this moment so many times that when it actually happened, my mind went completely blank. The rain kept falling. Drops ran down along the awning, then plinked onto the concrete below. There was almost no one else around. At 2 in the morning, the dorm was lit only by the yellow glow spilling from the main lobby. Malcolm still stood in front of me, not moving closer, not stepping back. He just watched me, as if waiting for me to decide. If you don't want to, he said softly, just say so. I'll never push you. I laughed, a shaky little laugh. Do you think I'm shaking because I'm scared? Malcolm frowned slightly. Aren't you? I shook my head. I'm shaking because I've waited too long for you to say that. In that moment, Malcolm's eyes lit up. Not the city's light, but the light of relief. He stepped half a step closer, reached out and gently touched my cheek. So cold. He whispered. Yeah. Want to go inside? No. Why not? I smiled. I want to remember this first moment. Malcolm smiled too. Then he leaned down. Our first kiss wasn't like the ones in movies. No fireworks. No music playing. No one clapping. Just 2 boys still clumsy about it. His lips touched mine very lightly, as if asking, is this okay? I gently gripped the front of his jacket, pulled him a little closer. That was my answer. The kiss lasted only a few seconds. but long enough to change my entire world. When Malcolm pulled back, both his cheeks were flushed. Sorry. Why are you sorry? Because. He laughed, embarrassed. I just forgot how to breathe. I burst out laughing. Same here. For the first time in my life, I understood that happiness could really be this simple. We officially became a couple that rainy night. No elaborate confession. No flowers. No ring. After our first kiss, Malcolm just held his hand out to me. Brady. Be my boyfriend. I looked at the hand waiting for mine, then looked at the man in front of me, the one who made vast, overwhelming New York feel warm. I placed my hand in his. I thought you'd have asked sooner. Malcolm laughed. I'm a coward. So am I. Guess we're even then. From that day on, we were a couple. At least to ourselves. At college in those years, two guys falling for each other wasn't exactly rare anymore. But both Malcolm and I were fairly private people. Not out of shame, but because we both liked keeping the things that mattered most just for ourselves. We still went to class like any other day. Still ate lunch together. The only difference was that under the table, Malcolm would secretly lace his fingers through mine. Or when we passed through an empty hallway, he'd brush my shoulder lightly. A very small gesture, but enough to make me smile for the rest of the day. Once, a classmate named Ava looked at me and asked, Brady, what? You've been smiling a lot lately. Have I? Yeah. Something good going on? I tried to keep a straight face. Nothing special. Ava rested her chin on her hand, studying me. I bet it's about love. I nearly dropped my fork. Malcolm, sitting across from me, had to bury his face in his water glass to hide a laugh. After Ava left, I kicked his foot lightly under the table. This is your fault. How is it my fault? You were laughing. I was not. I saw you. Malcolm leaned in close, his voice very low. My boyfriend's cute when he's flustered. I blushed instantly. Don't call me that here. Why not? What if someone hears? So what if they do? I looked at him. Malcolm gently took my hand. Brady. I'm not ashamed of loving you. That sentence warmed something in my chest. For the rest of my life, I would always remember it. That summer, Malcolm landed an internship at a well-known media company in Manhattan. He was so excited he hugged me right there in the middle of campus. I got it. Really? Really? I hugged him back, laughing. I knew you could do it. Malcolm had always been hardworking. Outside of class, he also worked part-time at a photo studio. Sometimes he took on portrait shoots for other students to earn extra money. His camera was practically glued to him. I used to tease him, "Are you majoring in marketing or photography?" He'd laugh. Marketing to make a living. And photography? To be myself. One weekend afternoon, I modeled for one of Malcolm's photography assignments. We went to Central Park. He kept giving directions. Don't look at the camera. Look at the trees. Look at the lake. Look at me. I laughed. You just told me not to look at the camera, right? And now you want me to look at you? Malcolm shrugged. I want this photo to be real. Real how? Like the look in your eyes whenever you look at the person you love. I looked at him. No acting. No posing. Just simply looking at Malcolm the way my heart always looked at him. He lowered the camera. Stood still for a few seconds. Done? I asked. He shook his head slightly. No. Then why aren't you taking the shot? Malcolm smiled. Because I got too caught up looking at you. I laughed out loud. That was Malcolm. Always turning the most ordinary days into the most beautiful memories. But neither of us knew. That very camera, those photos that seemed like nothing more than a hobby, would be the first thing to pull Malcolm toward a world of bright lights, fame, and the enormous billboards that, years later, I would look up at with a heart both proud and aching. The following autumn arrived faster than we expected. I moved into sophomore year, Malcolm into his senior year. For the first time since we'd gotten together, we began talking about something we'd both been deliberately avoiding until then. What happens after graduation? One Sunday evening, we sat on the steps in front of Butler Library. Fewer and fewer students passed by. The wind carried the scent of maple leaves and coffee. Malcolm turned his paper cup around in his hands. I just got an email. What email? From the company where I'm interning. I turned to look at him. They want to hire me full-time. I smiled immediately. That's wonderful news. Yeah. Why don't you look happy then? Malcolm sighed. It's a job in Manhattan. That's a good thing. But you've still got 2 more years before you graduate. The smile slowly faded from my lips. That was the first time we truly saw the gap between the present and the future. In the weeks that followed, Malcolm was busier than ever. Classes during the day, internship in the afternoon, part-time work at night. Some nights, he wouldn't text me until nearly midnight. Just got back to my room. Some nights, we barely managed a 5-minute video call before both of us fell asleep. I missed him, even though, technically, we were still on the same campus, just a few buildings apart. But it felt like we were living in 2 different worlds. One evening, I brought food to Malcolm's room. He was asleep, slumped over his desk, laptop still open, screen full of marketing plans. I quietly set the bag down, meant to drape a blanket over him. Then Malcolm opened his eyes. Brady. Sorry, I woke you up. He checked the time. Have you been waiting long? Just got here. He rubbed his eyes, then pulled me down to sit beside him. I miss you. I laughed. We saw each other yesterday. Still miss you. I wrapped my arms around him. Malcolm rested his head on my shoulder. After a long moment, he said quietly, I'm scared. Scared of what? That one day. I'll be so busy I forget how to love you. I shook my head. That won't happen. You're sure? Yeah. Why? Because the person who loves me has never once forgotten to bring me coffee, no matter how busy he is. Malcolm laughed. That's your standard? It is. Good thing then. Why? I've never forgotten. About a month later, the company where Malcolm interned held a promotional photo shoot. A male model suddenly canceled. The production team scrambled to find a replacement. Malcolm's manager looked at him for a few seconds, then asked, Want to give it a try? Malcolm thought he was joking. He'd never modeled before, never stood in front of a camera like that. But in the end, he agreed. That night, Malcolm told me all about it. I was stiff as a board. I laughed. No way. Seriously. The photographer had to keep directing my poses the whole time. And then, they said I photographed pretty well. Just pretty well? Yeah. I pulled out my phone. Show me the photos. Malcolm hesitated. I haven't sent them to you yet. Why not? Because. He scratched his head. I feel a little self-conscious about it. Self-conscious how? What if you see them and laugh? I raised an eyebrow. I'm your boyfriend. So, boyfriends are obligated to compliment their boyfriends. Malcolm laughed and opened his phone. When the photo came up on the screen, I went still. It was still Malcolm, but not entirely the Malcolm I saw every day. He wore a simple beige jacket, standing against a white background, eyes looking straight into the lens. Calm, confident, striking enough that I had to look again. So, he asked, Is it that bad? I shook my head slightly. No. Then, you're so handsome. Malcolm blushed immediately. Don't tease me. I'm being serious. I stared at the photo a few seconds longer, then smiled. Wouldn't be surprising if one day you end up on a billboard. Malcolm burst out laughing. A billboard? Yeah. Brady. What? I don't even know how to pose. You'll learn. I just want to do marketing. Maybe life has other plans. He shook his head. No. My dream was never to be famous. Then what is it? Malcolm looked at me for a long time, then answered, his voice so soft it was almost a whisper. Just to come home every night. To you, that's enough. Something in my chest went soft. I took his hand. I promise. Whatever happens later, we'll still go home to the same place together. Malcolm squeezed my hand gently. Promise. Promise. At the time, neither of us knew that some promises are made with complete sincerity. But life doesn't always give people the chance to keep them. Somewhere out there, a door was quietly opening in front of Malcolm, an opportunity so big it would completely change his life. And also the beginning of the biggest turning point in the love story of the two of us.